little step of my painting is to introduce a little tree through here, and I want a nice reflection of that in the water. I'm going to pick the position of my tree before I go putting it on there. I like to plan ahead a little bit. Now, if this were my tree and I put it right here in the middle of my painting, it would really be very bold and it would cut my picture in half. So I'm going to move it off center. Now, I run into a little bit of a thing. I have a little tree or a little bush here with lots of snow on it and things, and I could paint my tree right through that and then fight with all the branches trying to make it sharp against this snow and get myself into a pickle. Too far to the right, well, it's starting to hit into the middle of my painting again, so I'm going to look at painting it just to the left of that group of trees, that little bush there. And if some of my branches on the tree coincide with some of the branches in the background, then so be it. And I'm going to make sure I get a nice reflection down in the water. So again, plan ahead, and if you're ever not sure, you can always take your brush and just scratch through the paint. I'm going to borrow that line, so I'm going to borrow that tree branch there. So that's where my tree is going to go now. Repairing that would be just simply a case of tapping on a little bit of snow and putting a little dark on there. But again, you get a chance to plan your painting a little bit. So now I'm going to use linseed oil and this sort of dark burgundy brown colour I've made to thin my paint right down. I want this to be able to flow over all the other layers of paint, and thin paints don't stick to thick paints. They float across the top. Really nice. I can tuck my little palette into there on the side, and then I can reach for more paint when I need it. Now, I've said it before, make sure you use all the brush. Get your hand back down the handle of this brush. So when you're painting with it, you're using the whole of the brush handle. You paint using your fingers rather than your whole arm. Okay, I'm going to try and keep my hand to one side so I don't kind of block what I'm doing here. And again, I'm painting using just the tip of the brush. A little more paint. There we go. Wiggle, jiggle. And paint just using the point of that brush. Kind of tricky. I'm trying to paint with one hand and I'm trying to look through the viewfinder on the camera with the other. That's quite something. I won't try and do that too much. Now, before I go into painting too complicated a tree, I think it's another good idea now to start thinking about painting a reflection all at the same time. So I'm going to knock off a little paint here. So this tree leans to the right, so the reflection must lean to the right as well. Again, this doesn't have to be perfect, far from, so roughly the same, and there's a little V at the top of it, so again I'm going to go back in with my brush and I think about there, I'm going to drop in my V. So it looks close enough, it doesn't have to be perfect. And I'm going to carry on adding branches and reflections, so every 2 or 3 I'll stop and I'll add another branch or 2 to my reflection. And again, it's below the V, going to the right, so just before that V, and down a little bit lower, so it's down here, so it'll be somewhere down in here. So you see, bit by bit, I'll build myself a reflection. I'm going to time lapse through this bit so you can see the tree emerging a little quicker. I've put in lots more sticks and twigs as you saw there, and I just added, and they get to be fun, and you just kind of add as many as you want. And I still haven't really brushed across anything down here. I've been kind of holding myself back, and those of you who've been watching carefully will realise I haven't reflected my sunlight down into the water here yet, and that's going to be what I do next. I've still got my filbert brush, which is still clean. Remember, I put some snow in the background here, but that was on acrylic, so I didn't pick up any colour. And now while I've still got the brush nice and clean, I'm going to line up and I'm going to put some light down on the water here. Now, try and avoid hitting these reflections here. There are chocolatey browns and burgundies, because it will make a bit of a pickle of your paintbrush here. And I deliberately didn't make my tree bend too far over to the side here. So I'm going to just pull this down. Looking good. And again, watch the size. This tends to grow a little bit out of control sometimes, so it tends to be kind of more distinct here and less distinct as it travels towards you across the water. So here you can start letting the paint get a little more wayward. There's really not much paint on my brush here. And for good measure, if you want to get into making it look a little bit like it's got a bit of a swell on it, you can just gently brush across. I just knocked off some of that paint from my brush, and I'm going to just gently brush across here and there. This produces a kind of a nice wobble. And try to remember not to make it look dish-shaped. This is flat water, so when you're brushing across, make sure you go flat. And you might choose to do that a couple of times and brighten it up to match your sky. I'm going to play around with that a little bit more, and then we're going to come back and finish off my snow. So this is all still very wet, and I've just dry cleaned my little liner brush here, and I'm going to use this to brush across the reflections. And again, be very careful with this because the paint will move a great deal. So little flicks. We just want to do a little disturbance on the water here. Give your brush a little wipe. If you did this with a big brush, then you'd be getting yourself into trouble. So as you see, just create a little illusion of a ripple. You can do that across all of this. The big dark paint won't move so much, but these little branches we put on, you can move them. So I'm going to just get myself a little bit of this snowy bright colour here, and again just touch where you think the snow settled. Favour that side a little bit more. Maybe you could use a fan brush to do this. It would work equally well. I was having a little bit of trouble getting my paint to stick, so I added a tiny drop of linseed oil to it, and that makes it stick much easier. So I'm going to use a palette knife And I'm going to pick up my knife and I'm going to use the short blade of the knife. Just going to rub through my off-white colour. So I'm going to get a little bit of that white colour here and just here and there. I'm just going to take myself and just rub the knife gently on the canvas and put myself in a few water lines. Now the water's laying flat and level, so you don't want water lines that are going in all directions here. They should be laying flat and level as well. And of course, the final touch, a signature down in the corner. My initials, my little bird over the top. And of course, no painting's complete without a frame. I can't believe how many times I got that wrong. I had to shoot that about 6 times. You turn into an idiot when you've got to do something on camera, but there's my finished painting, all nicely framed up. There you go.